I want to highlight an important section from the National Taxpayers Advocates 2020 Purple Book, and I quote, "The IRS mission statement says the agency's mission is to provide America's taxpayers top quality service by helping them understand and meet their tax responsibilities and enforce the law with integrity and fairness to all. Since fiscal year 2010, the IRS budget has been reduced by more than 20% after adjusting for inflation. Largely as a result of these budget reductions, the IRS is neither providing top quality servicing nor enforcing the law with fairness to all." This should have everybody in this room concerned. So let me repeat one of those lines. The IRS is neither providing top quality service nor enforcing the law with fairness to all. Now, we can have a debate on whether a specific tax law is fair or not fair, but I suspect that there's a consensus that if a law is not enforced across the board, is not enforced the same for everyone or every group, that's not fair. And I'll open it to the whole panel. Does anyone disagree with that? Okay, so I think we have not consensus, but unanimity. And I think this is really jarring. The agency tasked with enforcing the law with integrity and fairness to all is failing at its core responsibility. IRS staffing is on the decline, as was noted earlier. The agency employed 78,000 people in 2019, nearly 16,000 less people than the employees it had just 10 years ago. The number of operations staff has fallen by 31%, and the number of revenue agents with the expertise to conduct audits of complex returns has fallen by 35%. And the IRS's $11.5 billion budget is $640 million below that of 10 years ago. That just doesn't seem right. Ms. Wong, I'll turn to you briefly for a question. When you have limited resources, you set your priorities, you often go after the low-hanging fruit. You touched on this in your testimony. Where's the low-hanging fruit that the IRS seems to be pursuing?
Well, the IRS should be pursuing those who contribute most to the tax gap. But as you mentioned, the simplest returns are those that get audited, as the colloquial term, but the correspondence exam by mail for low-income filers to send more documentation to substantiate their claims.
All right. So the low-hanging fruit, on one hand, you can say, well, go where it's the easiest to understand. Those are the simple individual returns. But the potential to find those abusing, the people taking advantage of the system, are going to be the more complex. Exactly. And the IRS doesn't have the resources. And I raise this because it's the individuals and groups that follow the law that are footing the bill for those who skirt the rules. I'm particularly concerned with this lack of funding and enforcement is allowing wrongdoers to get away with it within a very narrow area, our tax-exempt system. Last week, I released a report detailing a pattern of misdeeds by the NRA, the National Rifle Association. It details egregious spending by NRA leaders, extensive self-dealing and conflicts of interest, and pervasive efforts to hide their activities and avoid transparency. Last year in this room, I questioned the Treasury Inspector General for tax administration and laid out a series of scenarios similar to the allegations facing the NRA, and the TIGTA confirmed that they were worthy of investigation. I've asked the IRS to investigate these claims and understand that they cannot share any information due to Section 6103. However, I'm concerned that the National Taxpayer Advocates 2020 report that says the IRS is unable to properly administer our tax laws makes it harder to hold groups like the NRA to account. Ms. Wong, do you believe the IRS has the resources to investigate organizations like the NRA who use the complexity to hide their activities?
Look, I do know that just generally the IRS is increasingly outmatched by large organizations, both because it lacks the resources, as you said, needed to do the audits in the first place, but also when they do the audits to be able to do them thoroughly and follow through, again, because these organizations can throw massive resources at an audit to stall it, to flood the IRS with irrelevant documents, to stretch out litigation. And the IRS, on the other hand, is left struggling to pull together funds to actually hire people needed to even start or continue an audit.
Right, so we have an asymmetry. We have the organizations like the NRA or other large corporations who have well-paid, highly trained, very sophisticated tax experts, and an IRS who is understaffed, under-resourced, trying to make sure that the law is applied fairly. And we can debate the law, but I don't think there's any debate, as we said, that whatever the laws are, it should apply to all of us, not just those who don't have the resources to avoid them. Thank you. I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides to help the IRS fulfill its mission, ensure that our tax laws are applied fairly.
Thank the
I yield
gentleman.
back.
Let me recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Swazi.